Qualified immunity. It's a legal principle that some attorneys say prevents victims or their families from holding officers accused of misconduct accountable in the courtroom, even if that officer's conduct is egregious.
Eyewitness News reporter Mariah Medina talked to those who say it should be reformed and those who say doing away with it will make the community less safe.
I represent the families of Marquise Jones, Charles Roundtree, Devontae Snowden, Taylor Singleton, the family of Antrani Scott, and a number of other individuals in San Antonio and throughout the state of Texas.
Attorney Daryl Washington has sued the city and San Antonio police numerous times in civil court over the last decade, so he's familiar with the legal hurdle known as qualified immunity.
It has really given police officers a free pass.
The way it's played out over time, and the courts have interpreted qualified immunity in such a way that it actually functionally acts as an absolute shield for law enforcement officers.
In the wake of calls for police reform, lawmakers and celebrities, including Spurs head coach Greg Popovich, have called for an end to the legal principle, which oftentimes stops families from holding individual officers accountable for their actions. But the executive director of the state's largest law enforcement union says such a move won't come without consequence.
They're not going to be okay with placing their lives in danger, in between danger and innocent people, if they're going to be second guessed at every turn and then become also financially liable for those actions.
And even if the legal hurdle is eradicated, in most cases, families will still not be able to recover much from officers accused of misconduct. But Washington says, in his experience, it's not about the money.
If you were to take a poll of most people and say, do you want $5 million or do you want this officer held responsible for taking your kid's life? 99.9% would say, I want that officer held liable for taking my child's life and to make sure that that doesn't happen to anyone else.
Mariah Medina, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.
The Supreme Court declined to hear cases about qualified immunity this time around. Advocates for reform are now calling on Congress to act.